Good evening. Just thought I'd do a quick video. I'm not going to use the camera today because I've just taken a shower. So you'll have to be just putting up with my voice. Yeah, we've had so much drama over the last couple of days because of the tariff announcement over the weekend. So I just thought I'd start showing the indices. They had a big gap down. So these top three are the US ones, and to the bottom right, the Russell 2000. We had a big gap down on everything first thing in the morning. I think Aussie filled the gap immediately, but all the others have just fallen directly away from the gap. And Russell is the only one actually that's given a decent sort of bounce today to try and come up and fill some of that space. It's filled to within the wick, but not to the actual close of the previous candle. And all the others are still miles away. Yesterday was a holiday, so we didn't get much action, and hence why I didn't do a video yesterday, because I wanted to see a little bit more first and see whether any structures broke. That one I can take out there. In the bigger picture, the indices are obviously still bullish. Like we had a big drop, but we've had big drops or drops of this magnitude before. Let's just bring up S&P. Had drops of even bigger magnitude before. I can't remember if these had specific reasons for them, but in the big picture, this isn't much of a drop. I did have sort of aggressive short alerts. I've started putting question marks on some of the charts just because I want to monitor particularly zones like this where I've said it's not necessarily a high probability zone. I want to sort of distinguish that from a zone that I've considered higher probability, so I can figure out whether these zones are actually worth even alerting in the first place. Like if too few of the question marks are working, then I'll stop doing alerting what I consider to be weak zones. But in this case, then on a few of these, with the short alerts played out really nicely. If anybody am brave enough, probably freaking out, holding it over the weekend, not knowing what's going to happen. Obviously, in the bigger picture, these can drop a lot more. There's a lot of gaps and a lot of space below, and we've had a massive uptrend. So is this the top? Who knows, might be. But it's still very early days. And you can see over here, similar type structure, but are we now going into this part of it is anyone's guess at this stage. So I think that's about all there is to say on the indices. The gaps, I would need to go back and check. Actually, used to sort of typically fill the following week, but I think in some cases, particularly if it is a significant top or with significant news, it may not fill immediately. Certainly to the downside, they don't always fill at all, if ever. You can see there's gaps from the bounce that we had at the low. There's a gap down here. There's a gap there. There's a gap there. There's heaps of gaps. But then in contrast, there was also one here which did fill. So yeah, you can't use them as a be all and end all, but you can certainly consider that price might try and go back and fill a gap. At some stage. Okay, so yeah, that was just a quick look at the indices, and just on the FX stuff. So initially we had a bit of a drop and a gap down on the euro, pound, etc., i.e. small gap up on the dollar, but then it reversed quite quickly. And since yesterday, the dollar's just been dropping, and we've had strong moves up on euro, pound, and Aussie. There's also been some impact. There's certainly been some impacts across the currency markets, and I haven't been looking at them much, so I'm not sure what's happened or if there was any other news this morning, but this is somewhat a product of the dollar falling, but also the euro rose because we had an unusual situation. If I go over here to my pound layout, you can see the pound dollar went up, euro dollar went up down here on the right, but then we also had euro pound go up, as you can see on the top right. And that's unusual. Like normally, if euro pound goes up, then pound dollar will go down and vice versa, because normally prices are only driven by either the dollar or the euro. And thus these two at the top tend to do the opposite. But in this case, that's what I say. So I know that to some extent we've had a euro rise as well as a dollar drop, because of what I can see across all the charts. And I think there might have been euro news this morning, but I'm not 100% sure. But that's that. And then obviously Bitcoin is our critical thing. So go to the higher time frame chart just to start off with. We had made a weekly demand. We had made a 5-day, in fact. So we've made, let me show the 5-day. So we had made a 5-day demand. We don't tend to like when they test immediately like this. Like if I was going to say this is going to hold, like really I want it to go up, have another candle higher to have this be a decent zone. It's also very close to the price, and we took out stops over here to the left. Then inside it, we had a weekly demand. We have a weekly demand, which obviously we've gone now almost to the bottom of. And my concerns with these zones were always that we left some stops under this consolidation here. We've left some stops under this consolidation here. We've got the whole bigger trend line stops. But also, you know, this is still a corrective move, clearly, in a downtrend, right? Immediate downtrend. So we've got the macro, as I've always said, we've got the macro uptrend. We're in this giant 3-month demand. So I've been looking for longs. I want to be long biased at this stage on the high time frames, but also I need to see something here that makes me want to be long biased. And so far, we're not seeing that. We've seen a very corrective move and then another move up, but now it's also very corrective. And I say corrective because we haven't broken this high and then stayed above the high. If it was an impulsive move, we would have gone higher and stayed above the high. But we haven't. We've dropped back down into this range. So this is looking much more like an ABC corrective structure in a possible bear flag. So ideally, I would have liked this to go a bit higher. As I've talked about previously, you know, the decent retest zones would be up here, the monthly supply, 2-week, 3-week supply inside, I believe. Even here, 5-day supply or 4-day supply up there. So we haven't even made it up to those zones. This is a very, very weak bounce. Previously, many times I've compared to this consolidation over here. In fact, I was comparing it all the way down here. I've now seen everybody else comparing it to this consolidation, which has also made me a bit nervous. So I actually wondered if we were going to do something different here, because normally I'm quite good at pattern recognition, and I do tend to spot things earlier than a lot of other people. And normally by the time I see things, people spot things. So I was spotting similarities in this move up to where we are now. And, you know, the overall structure over here to where we are this year or 2025, very early, and also anticipated, you know, coming down this low based on, you know, what the test this did over here, etc., etc. And so I had like removed some of the earlier entries. I had sort of similar to this. I had some early entries in there, and then when I recognised this pattern, I kind of made them. I said we'd still watch them, but made them less certain, and was looking more down in that area, based on current PA and obviously not based on 2022. But yeah, so obviously we've had a bear flag here, and this is now what everybody was quite obvious to everybody and what they're seeing. Similarly over here, this had made 3-week and I think weekly demand. Let me just go to the 3-week quickly. So yeah, you can see here that we had made a 3-week demand in there. But then I think we had some little bounces through here on the tests, but obviously then it broke back through it, flipped it to supply. So even while similarly we haven't made a 3-week in current PA, we've made a 2-week. So we've got a 2-week demand in here, which we did have a bounce off and a push up last week. And then that weekly, like these are weak zones. So there is an expectation similar to back in 2022 that they're going to break, unless we see some significant follow-up off them. So we can still, so I'm still obviously watching for the long side. You know, we are still in 3-month demand here. We have hit this weekly at the low, the green circle area that I was looking at before. But there's always pros and cons on both sides. So as of now, we're still holding, we've taken out last week's low, but we're still holding just above the 7th of January low there, but there were some stops through here. I didn't have them circled on this chart. I had a circle in here on my lower time frame chart, similar, just showing the stops that could get targeted where we haven't had a proper test of lower zones. So you can see down here, there's another weekly zone. There's a CME gap there. So there were various draws that made me think we could go down here. And then secondarily, if we did get here, there is a chance then we're going to take out these stops and all play out this larger bear flag. So it's just a question on timing. And I am still quite torn on bear flag versus 3-month demand. It's a challenging one. So as always, just trade both directions and trade what you see. To the downside, if we do fall out of this bear flag, I've moved this box slightly. So if you followed me previously, you'll know I had this So 113 to 127 extension. Quite often when we do an ending structure, like if this is to be the bottom for a bigger move up, we will fall into the 113 to 127 area, or similarly at tops, we can do a 113 of the last up move. We can do a 113 to 127 extension. I think these are a little bit shorter. So it's worth watching that area. And I've got some alerts here on the lower time frame chart for the possibility of a bounce in this box. Failing that, we have 3-month demand down here and then various zones inside. Obviously, we'd have to not knife catch when it comes down here and just assess what the reaction is in this area. There's always various reasons why things could bounce at a particular spot. And then my real point line in the sand would be 46,200. If we start to break the yearly level, okay, we could go deeper inside the yearly zone. But if we start to break that level, then we've got serious problems. So yeah, that's to the downside. Then the short to the upside that I've already commented on. Lower time frame. So I have left. I'm a bit wary. So I've had these possible alerts in for a while in the hopes. So back over here, I wanted these to get hit, but they didn't. And then back here, when we got the test, I had a more aggressive alert for the weekly, I think 2-weekly demand that went in there. So that alert got hit and left all these stocks behind. Didn't come back for those levels. So I've left them in, but I am a lot less certain of these zones than I was, when we're on the way up, then they're more likely to get tested and hold. But when we've started to gain momentum going down, then quite low time frame zones are much less likely to hold. So particularly ones down here, we're much more likely to get wicks, and we need to look at where the walls and liquidations are and things like that. So be a bit wary to the downside. Like I said, we're still in this weekly demand here. The problem we have now, lower time frame, is, let me just show you the 5-day, is that we're now potentially going to flip this 5-day, which what was a weak demand, to supply. Similarly, and we're seeing this on a lot of the alt charts as well, so just be a bit wary what you're trading. Similarly, there might be a full day a little bit higher in there. Those are both going to close today. So you need to check, and I think the 3-day, the 3 days are not closing today. So the 2-day, 4-day, and 5-day are all closing today. So just be a bit wary of what's above you. So if you're going to get, if we do get a bounce now and you start seeing, a lower time frame, 2-hour, 4-hour, 1-hour zones that you want to get long on, if we take out previous, I know the previous week's low is a bit lower actually. I thought it was one of the higher levels. If we take out the previous low, then just be conscious that potentially you're trading back up into high time frame levels. Now that we have had a decent quick drop here, so if we do go up, there is a chance we could retrace this whole thing. Similarly, on the while I'm wary because of the bear flag and the corrective nature of this move, we are still in an uptrend. So even if we come down here, there is still the possibility that we have another run that then takes out everything on the short side. So for now, I've set alerts at this immediate 8-hour supply, which was 8 hours of 4-hour inside it, which I was hoping would hit earlier, but just missed, I think, or tested too early. So I think we set that late last night. And then up here, there's an untested 4-hour, 8-hour zone up there that I've also alerted if we're going to get the lower high off this now last drop, or potential last drop. And then beyond that, obviously, we've got the higher zones if it does want to run. So those are just the lower time frame, possible scalp swings or areas that you could expect some sort of a reaction. So I think that's pretty much it on Bitcoin as far as giving you all the levels that I'm looking at on the lower and high time frames. Ether, much the same, but Ether's weaker. So Ether is a nice demonstration, in fact, of the weakness of zones. So in the case of the weekly, so similar to Bitcoin, we had this weekly demand in here that was created, but then obviously tested, like I said, far too quickly. In this case, this was a weak zone because we hadn't broken the last high. So in the case of Bitcoin, as I said, we've got this uptrend. Draw that. Go down to a lower time frame to draw that. So in the case of Bitcoin, where I said we're in this possible mini uptrend that could end up as a 3-wave move in the bear flag, or possible bear flag. In the case of Ether, this is a lower high. So in my other chart, I have in fact drawn just that little not ideal. I don't really know. Maybe it's better to draw that there, but you know, we're in a bit more of a triangle type of structure on this. It's not really a triangle because this high hasn't hit the level of the triangle. So you can argue it should be like that, and we had a triangle breakout, but hence why I don't use trend lines very often. But anyway, we had a lower high off this, thus this weekly demand was weak, and we've, as a result, gone straight through it. Similarly here, we're now back in 2-week demand below in a 4-day, 5-day inside it, and I have got an alert basically where that wick has just ended. So again, seeing the reaction here. Similar to Bitcoin, we're still in a big 3-month demand. I did want and have always wanted and continue to want, ideally, to have this zone tested. This was my we're going to get front run long entry. This is my aggressive long entry off the 3-month demand, but obviously didn't get very far. This was my front run. We're going to just bounce. I think there's an 8 or 12 hour in here that will bounce and just front run this. So that kind of worked all right as a front run entry. And then this was my preferred zone for looking for proper long. So I'd be at the start of this last up move, which we haven't quite tested. So yeah, if we get down to here, that's where I'd look for longs. On the short side again, we haven't really, I did have a short entry for this 3-day, 5-day supply here. So again, like Bitcoin, this is still in, if we go to the 3-day, it's still in a downtrend based on the 3-day. So if you look at these waves going down, we're still in the range of that last down move. So this is just simply a correction of that last down move for now. Again, I want to be bullish because we're in this giant 3-month demand, but it's a question of, you know, is it going to go all the way to the bottom? And again, I won't harp on about previous analysis I've done, but I have a lot of reservations about this demand. Again, it's a weak demand. Even this demand is weak due to the fact we have not made a significant break of this high. Just tapped just above it, swing failed and dropped down. So those are some of my reservations. However, I prefer supply and demand over and above everything else. So still want to look for longs in here, but want to see a better reaction than what we've got so far. So as I said, we broke weekly demand here. We also had a 5-day, which we've broken, and we have the chance, as I said, for Bitcoin of creating 5- and 4-day supply here, unless we get a bounce in the next few hours. So the pink dash lines are just unconfirmed zones that I'll draw in later if we continue to close below. And then again, you run the same risk that we're not going to get back past this. What's that, 3,090 or so zone? Like if it comes back up in here, it may not get past there. If it does, it has some nice space to the supply. But just need to see, like, I don't know if I'd alert so aggressively for shorts on 3090. I would rather see a bit more of a pullback, I believe. To the upside, again, similar to Bitcoin, we've got preferred short areas, which are in the 4K region, where we've got weekly, 2-weekly, 3-weekly supply. But then more aggressive short possibilities obviously come sooner. So we have that as our original one. Potentially taking out these equal highs here as a possibility. Then there's 3-5-day supply. So there's a lot of zones above that haven't been tested. So again, makes it challenging to know. Obviously, you can wait for the highest ones. They'll be the highest probability. These ones that are in the middle always run the risk that we're just going to run straight through them and it's going to head for the missed imbalances at the top. So, you know, this could run all the way back up here and still be relatively bearish. So they'll still be starting a downtrend if it wants to. So yeah, again, just looking for the reaction here. Are we going to continue to make higher lows? We failed to make a higher high, so this is not strong demand, but we do still have this trend line in play. I need to see what happens. I think ETHBTC is much the same. ETHBTC has come off the trend line, but we're also in a 3-week demand here. It's come quite deep inside. If we close down here, then we might well flip that to 3-week supply, which isn't ideal. But again, we're just sort of in this corrective type pattern, falling off the trend line a little bit. Maybe we should roll that here, but still, I think it's fallen off regardless. Again, my preferred zone for shorting Ether US dollar would be if this hits up here, but it hasn't done that, rejected off 2-week supply earlier. So really just fighting between supply and demand. We've got 2-week supply at the low here, 2-week supply at the high, another supply a little bit higher. And we're just slap bang in the middle of the range at the moment, so it's not an easily tradable area on the high time frame. Quick look at the low time frame for Ether. So Excuse how messy my charts are, just there's a lot going on. I mean, they're always messy, I guess, but there's always a lot going on with the price. So as you can see, we've just hit this possible entry that I had here. We did have a CME gap. It was a tad bit lower, but CME has dropped it to a little bit of a discount on Ether, which is unusual. I say a little bit as it's like $3 or something. Ether CME normally, I think, runs at about $30 above. So that's interesting. It's fallen to a little bit of a discount, but it has now filled the gap. So I have deleted that. It was slightly lower, but I've deleted the gap. We had 8-hour demand here. I think it was a 4 and 5 day. And we're also inside this bigger 2 weeks. So and around 61 fib of that last up move. So it was a reasonable place to look for the possibility of a long. So you can keep an eye on that on the lower time frames. Short side, not dissimilar to Bitcoin. This now has a daily supply above. So given, yes, we may make a higher low, so it can run through, but we have also got lower highs. So again, just need to see the reaction here, see if we get, so I've alerted more aggressively 8-hour supply in here and then the daily above. And these big runs are harder, you know, they can just run straight back up through everything, and similar to what you saw here. So if you see consolidation like this, like a significant amount of consolidation in here, then it's more likely that we're going to run through previous short zones like we did over here. Similarly, low time frame, so same as Bitcoin, like I had the 2-week demand alerted here, which just tapped really nicely and went up, got a little short scalp in there, and then it went through this one and then up into 12-hour supply. So for this, I was looking for the lower highs. So on Ether, I was looking for lower highs more than on Bitcoin because we were still rejecting this 3-day supply, 3-day and 5-day supply up there. And I could see a little bit more weakness on Ether. So therefore, while I didn't try and alert for lower highs on Bitcoin, Bitcoin as well, actually, I should also comment the Confluence that I normally look at with Korea. So you'll notice that over here, Korea had these equal highs. This Bitcoin Korea pair had these equal highs there. So when the price came up on the 5th of January, the US dollar pair took out those monthly highs, but Korea hadn't. So I said more. Actually, I didn't talk about that in detail either. Like over here, we had a whole bunch of stops here, so it wasn't very clear where the top would happen, which is why I had the circle, which you saw on the low time frame chart. So I said also just look at watch for when Korea takes out these equal highs as well, and Korea did go a bit higher too, and hence we got a bit more of a push on Bitcoin on the lower time frame chart. But yeah, I was looking for a bit more of a move on Korea, hence why I didn't look for a lower high on Bitcoin. So in the case of Ether, we hadn't tapped this 12-hour supply on that high there. So I alerted it again, said, look for a swing failure. We didn't actually get a swing failure, at least on the lower time frames. I think on the weekly, it did end up as one. Then gave another couple of re-entries there before this drop. And like Bitcoin, I'd put a question mark on the weekly zone just to see, but I was a bit wary of it and I hadn't analyzed properly. So I just alerted it so we could see it hit, and has had no reaction, has gone straight through it. Yeah, so sorry, I hadn't commented on Bitcoin here. The circle was because of all those stops that we had over here that we had I think a weekly high, maybe it was that lower level, then a daily high, and then if you look at the lower time frames, we had a whole bunch more stops. So the wick did eventually take out all of the stops, even on the lower time frames. Hence why I had the circle with the 2 crosses in it, just kind of going, looking for swing failures generally in this area. Unfortunately, in this case, it also didn't give me a retest entry because I wanted that bounce back up to here, which we didn't get, but did get on Ether. Yeah, so that's about it. Let me think. Oh, on Ether, so similar to Bitcoin. Again, we had zones down here. This 8-hour or 12-hour demand down here that wasn't hit on this low, so still has those stops underneath. So again, could still run some of these stops. And then whether we, in the bigger picture with both of these, are we, is it now time for us to fall out of this bear channel and make lower lows? And if we do, looking at that green circle that I pointed out before in the monthly demand below, around, what's that, 2,500 type area would be the next area that I'm looking for. So yeah, that's it on Bitcoin and Ether, and then 24 minutes. The other thing I wanted to comment on quickly was the majors, just the alerts. So I haven't done a video update on these in detail for a while. I think in the last video I just showed them briefly, and then I posted them in the Telegram channel a few times and more just to show new entries that I've added and things like that, and some of my initial analysis. So on all of them, I had short entries. Some went higher, and I always said so. Actually, I'll talk about others first quickly. US dollar dominance chart there. I don't want to go into a massive amount of detail. So this is still basically doing what we talked about it doing with my rough line that I drew months and months ago. So that's not unexpected. Others. So again, I've done many videos on this in detail, so I'm not going to go into it in detail now. I will just show you where we're at with regard to the analysis from previously. So, and only because it's relevant to a lot of alts. So we have all these stops left up here. I think those wicks took out the first circle up there. We have some stops left above that green circle, some stops left here. We also had 2 month and 3 month supply put in here. So I was looking for the possibility of us getting a bounce on this daily demand, went a bit deeper inside. The wick's obviously gone through this. I was looking for a bounce there. Initially, I had this larger black line drawn. But I said that was possibly a little too optimistic to think we'd go all the way back up there when we had just made 2-3 months supply in here. So then I circled here saying, well, maybe, in fact, that's as high as we're going to go. So that is basically exactly what's played out. So it's given really nice bias flips for alts. Then lower time frame. We have this 4-5 day demand. Again, most alts look like this. What we've now seen is a lot of alts have tested this zone. Some are holding, some are not. So what I said was the optimistic bullish scenario would be this green line. It was not my preferred scenario, but that we would come down into here and that we would get that push up higher into these monthly supplies, perhaps up to this weekly, which hasn't quite been tested up the top here, take out a lot of these trendline stops. Now, some alts have done that, but not many. But some we are seeing, they've got stop runs they can do, but most of what we're seeing is that they are rejecting off monthly to monthly supplies, with a handful having run either higher in those zones. I don't think any, maybe 1 or 2 have broken the zones, but not many. Then my preferred and the scenario I thought was more likely was this red line based on coming off 2 months supply. Yes, it can go higher inside, but again, my bias coming off 2 months supply is more down. This isn't a good demand level. So what we're looking at when we're looking at the bounce where we are now on the question mark is, chart a bit bigger, is we're looking at that this is the original demand that we're holding. So this is the support level. So we had a bounce off there, made a higher high. Then we can look at this demand here. We can look at that for another long entry. Now, in this case, it didn't make a higher high. So what it's saying is this demand is weak. And what we saw there is when we had the drop, we did come right back through that demand and we came back into this weekly zone. So our original zone is still holding for now on that wick. But it now has had 1 test, 2 tests, arguably 3 tests if you call that a sort of a provisional bounce off it. We've got obviously the bigger potential head and shoulders. We've got this bear flag here, which we've been watching all the analysis that I've given you in the past. But now we've had, not the best zone anyway here, this weekly zone, and it's already had multiple tests off it. It's still unable to get through supply, has made a major supply right above now. So my bias just can't be up on this until I see something flip. And that, that's challenging because, if this is to flip, it would have to go up a lot and then you see the flip. So we still try and anticipate when we might get bounces. So like I said, we came a bit lower than my black line projection here, but we did get some sort of bounce. Obviously you expect some sort of rally and then you're trying to judge how far that rally is going to go. So obviously my bias was still following the red line as going down, either to test this weekly level again, but more likely my bias still remains going down into this 3 month demand below, which hasn't been tested in the bigger picture, if not lower. And I'm sorry, I know all lovers won't like to hear that. But in the bigger picture, again, we have this same scenario. We have an annual demand down here that hasn't been tested. So we've had an impulse up and we're making a consolidation here. This is starting to look quite bearish through here. It's possible this ends up as some sort of a bull flag for a breakout. That's still obviously a possibility. You've got to see all the possible scenarios. But really my preference, when I look at the double top here, I'm thinking that this plays out and takes out that low into this annual demand all down here. Now, from a market perspective, that's 50 billion in the case of alts, and I don't know if that's realistic. So some people who know more about fundamentals than I do might say that's completely unrealistic. So again, unless we look at lower time frame, maybe that would be a regulation being put in or something like that would cause a bigger drop like that, or really alts going to zero. But to be fair, so many alts do look horrendous. So it's a hard one. A lot of alts, yes, we've had bounces this week, but many of them are at all-time lows and are just, testing the breakdown. I can't give an example here, but testing the breakdown of all-time lows on the most recent bounce. So anyway, not to be fully bearish, we are still holding this low time frame zone that I wanted. We are also going to make, again, on many alts, hide those drawings again so you can see better. But you can see I've already got the 5-day supply drawn in there. So this is still going to be a weak supply for now until this low is broken. So you can potentially short there if we get a retest on some alts and maybe see it come off, but this is a weak zone for now. But I'm considering on some alts setting alerts there. So then back to the majors quickly. So these majors, the old majors actually look less similar to others than a lot of alts, because the structures are just very different. Try and think how best to do this, to just do this relatively quickly. But I'm probably going to have to do it individually because these really just don't look like. So yeah, because they look so different. So obviously we still have these trendline stops. That's not the best drawing for that, but taken to those TRX, you can see has taken out some of the trendline stops, had a nice accumulation through there, and is now just rejected off the alert that I had at 5-day supply in here, weekly supply higher. I was wondering if TRX would bounce on any of these zones. Like obviously it keeps bouncing, but now it's chosen to go all the way back through. But I've just been a bit more conservative on the alerting in weekly demand back down there for the long side. Failing that, if this is just a B wave, so we still have the challenge. Well, I mean, TRX has the challenge overall that this is potentially A, B, C. But that aside, even if we go just the immediate wave, if we have that as a correction, and then this is well, that's an A, that's a B, this is a C, and now we could make a triangle here and go back up to try and get to some of these higher levels, or this can still make a lower low at this point. So again, just need to see the reaction on this zone as it comes in. It's not dissimilar to Bitcoin, this chart really, that we're in this a bit stronger obviously, but we're in this consolidation correction of a drop. And there's a question of whether the drop is going to have continuation or this has found a proper bottom here. So see what happens when we hit that zone, and then short side, that would be the next entry up there. I haven't added anything new on this. Litecoin is one of the weaker ones. Litecoin, I have for a long time been much more reluctant to put any long entries on this. In the bigger picture, I always wanted to be bullish on this. This has hit quite an endurance. You can see this is an annual demand here, and I have seen some people say, "Oh, this is going to do, this is a 7-year consolidation." This is, I think, in fact, 9-year consolidation, but similar to Ripple, that this is consolidation that's going to do a massive breakout. Yes, it's entirely possible, but I'm not willing to hold Litecoin in the hope that it might do it sometime in the next 10 years. That is entirely up to you. This could, it has hit annual demand down here, but the annual demand has arguably played out. It made a new high. So it is possible now, again, from the same range perspective as like Ether, that it could come down and take out that low. We had a lot of long entries through these 2-month, monthly, 3-month demands that we had through here, but they've been unable to break any sort of supply. So I've pretty much stopped putting longs in on this because, yes, it might bounce on any of these wicks, but there's no clean demand. The other thing on Ether and so on some of the majors, like I said, we've got these major supplies that have been hit. So here you can see we've got a 2-monthly supply. It's the 2-month chart. It has just tapped into the bottom of it and fallen off. I don't think there's a 3-month. In fact, there's a 3-month there as well. Yeah, there's in fact a 3-month supply. So it came up to hit the monthly level inside it. So in some cases like these, I'm putting more aggressive shorts. Sure, it can go higher in the zone if it wants, but in this case, it hasn't. In the case of Litecoin, it's now also made a 2-weekly supply in there. So I have put a new possible short entry for a retest of that area. And it's hard because I don't know where the potential bottom is going to be on this. This is a range still holding that. But again, 1, 2, 3, 4, arguably 5, 6 hits on it, and a 7th hit. Is it really going to hold? Personally, not overly optimistic. So my bias on this is now much more on the short side. And again, like this is a more aggressive entry. It might have a 3-week just above, but it's coming off 2-month supply in here, so 3-month supply. Sorry. So at the moment, I'm still very biased to down on this. It's also made a daily, so maybe it won't even get up that high. But yeah, so Litecoin, yeah, we had the alert here for 3-month supply for the test on that. And then I would also alert it here for daily supply. So I've got a more aggressive entry a little bit later. And now I've alerted for a little bit higher than that previous entry on the 2-week supply. See what happens if and when it gets back up there. Ripple. So Ripple again resembles more like the others chart. So you can see that we had all the trend line stops through here. It ran through them. This, I believe, let me just check. This has a 2-month supply in there. I don't know if I haven't. I know this. So this doesn't have any monthly. So it has. So it does have a monthly supply, arguably. So it closed below here and it closed below here, but I haven't actually drawn it because that might mean my whole chart is brown. And we came up a bit higher inside. I actually do want to draw it because if I don't draw it, then I forget. So again, on Ripple, it has a decent monthly supply up here. So that would have been my preferred short entry, but obviously it hasn't got up there. It had a weekly supply in here, so this was my more aggressive. There was a 12-hour in here. It was an aggressive entry. Obviously went through that one. I think it was a 12-hour. Yeah, so it went through that one. And it was at that first monthly level, so I figured it was worth watching and went up to this 12-hour at the top. So again, it's challenging to know exactly where they're going to reject because there's so much chop coming down and so many missed zones above. But in this case, that gave a really nice entry on the 12-hour there. Didn't give me a retest and has now come down into this 4-day demand. So again, similar to others, had a decent first bounce off that 4-day, but obviously is now coming back to test it. So again, just need to see if this is going to hold here, if it's going to break. Very similar to others, it hasn't, this hasn't even really got support here. This would be your preferred long entry down that 3-day or the lower 3-day or the annual. So there's a lot of entries below, a lot of areas below it can go if it wants to break down this macro range. But there's not really any decent structure here to the left. And this also now has that, so very similar to others, it's now got a 3-day supply above, maybe it'll have a 4 and 5-day in there. Yeah, that's going to convert to a 4-day today. So it's going to be a 4-day supply in here. So again, just need to see, are we in a structure much the same as others where we've done a big move, we're now testing and we're going to go for another, sort of an ABC kind of structure in here? Or is this just done? We're just continuing the downtrend from here. Hard to know. Or are we just going to come back in here and test and then fall off? So I need to watch those zones and I need to consider. So I'm just going to wait till the end of the day to think about these, whether I want to alert. Like my preference would be to alert this if this breaks the low. So if that breaks the low there, then I want to get the test there. But if it doesn't break the low, it's much lower probability. And obviously, like I say, there's still higher zones above, and it's obviously much more dependent on what Bitcoin's going to do. So that's that. BCH again is another different structure. A lot of people have been calling for this to break out, and again, it's been a hard one. It's in annual supply here. It's the 3rd hit. I think it keeps pushing inside it. And while everybody's been very bullish, I've still just been highly reticent. This move up is just ugly. If you look at the impulse here, even that one there, this is just nasty and corrective, but then it does still keep going. So again, we do sometimes see that vertical accumulation, which just blasts off. It is in supply here. This is the 2-month chart. We've got 2-month demand. It has flipped to 2-month demand. Actually, there's one just right below current price there. But it's just, this has made me nervous for a really long time that at some point it's going to come and take all these stops. So it did take some of them here, but stopped also, in fact, just above the level I wanted, which was kind of annoying. So this was really the area that I wanted tested. It was a yearly level retest and 3-month demand. So that was really where I wanted it to hit when it came down into here. And it didn't. I think we did get a couple of entries on the way up there. Then it had made a monthly supply, so I was short biased. Then it appeared to be looking like I wanted to break the monthly supply, so I went back to long bias, and now we've been getting shorts in again. And again, in my last update in the Telegram channel, I said we were hitting 2 weekly demand here, so I had a long entry for there, but then also we had 1 day, 2 day supply. Now it didn't quite hit the 2 day at the top, but we got a bounce up into there and now dropping lower. So now our next step, I want to see if we get a reaction on this 2-month level retest in there, but it's just so choppy when I look at the lower time frames. This was a 3-day demand entry I had earlier on, but I was still quite reticent because of monthly supply. So this maybe is a more interesting level to look at if it comes back there. I still just don't like the PA on this, and even when it's come up here, it's just so choppy and unpleasant. And I believe I have looked at all the BTC pairs for all of these, and I believe that's also in an annual supply. But maybe I need to go back and check that. But yeah, just be careful on this. Like, I think it's got big zones, so you can trade the big zones, but just there is a possibility that I think it can wick through all of this if it wants to. Like, I just see this whole move in the bigger picture as a real choppy mess. But this is a year of PA, so yes, it can do that. It can drop in one candle if it wants. It is crypto. But also it can equally chop its way down. So you could certainly get plenty of entries or plenty of scalps off this in the interim. At the moment, yeah, so I haven't got any new short entries, although again, it looks like because there's just too much demand on this, so I don't think it's worth looking for shorts now. Like I've done the first few. If you're holding from those, then great, see what happens. And if it does get a wick through all that PA, that would be nice for you. And that level out, because that's not useful. But really, I might look to short this if we flip this 2 weekly supply, demand to supply. If it breaks, then I might look for shorts off the back of that. But for now, I want to see the reaction on 2-month demand and see if we can get up to taking some of the stops above this previous high. And I think there's equal highs up here, and there's just some significant highs over there. But I still think there's a chance this can go for either off the back of the 2-month demand there, or even if it does dip through everything, off the back of this 3-month level here. So yeah, that's the old majors. New majors again, like much more resemble the others chart. So all of these, I think, have the 3-4 day demands below all of testing. I have put alerts or not alerts. So again, I did share all these in the channel. I put alerts on the ones that were stronger, but obviously for the most part, although Litecoin's kind of disproved this point since it took off on its own on a much more bearish streak than everything else much earlier. And I wondered if that was a precursor to Bitcoin dropping. Turns out it was. The ones I alerted, yeah. So on these, on the 4-5 day demands, I expected for them all to hold or none of them to hold really. However, the ones that were more bearish, I haven't alerted the demand. So you can see I alerted the demand on Dogecoin because this had only bounced up to weekly supply in here, and it has still got the potential to go higher if it wants to test the monthly or 3-monthly above. So there's a 3-month supply in there, there's a yearly level, and it has more. Let's go and look at Doggy first. It has more scope to take out these trendline stops. Now, look, like I've made this mistake in the past, the risk you have is that actually it's not. Just because it's got more scope to take out the stops, it can just mean it's weaker where the others have gone higher and have hit the monthly supplies. But yeah, so this at least has 2 monthly demand at the lows. It's coming to the weekly inside it. We've still got that giant wick, which I think near enough went to 0 on Binance. So it can still retrace a lot more of this wick, but we'd come down to the 61 fib of the wick. So again, worth potentially looking for if this was going to give another up move from here. Next alert I've got down, again, they start to become higher risk alerts because of the wick going through, as I've explained previously. Like I've still alerted some of the old zones because some of the old zones still exist on some exchanges. But again, just need to monitor reactions as and when they get there. So in the case of Doggy, it only hit weekly supply here, managed to get the retest off the 12-hour inside it. I didn't have an alert for the provisional hit because I wanted a bit higher. And now I just need to see if this is going to give any sort of a bounce. So again, what we might find is if this holds, assuming Bitcoin's going to hold and it's still dropping right now, if this holds, we might find some alts only get bounced up to here and other alts are going to get bigger moves. So what I want to do, and that's why I want to assess whether I should alert these zones for shorts later, because it's just going to depend on the strength of the move and where it's coming off at the high. So Doggy at least, did take out some of these stops. I think it obviously came up to just about equal highs there by the looks of it. Has left obviously a lot more stops higher, so it can go higher if it wants to, but doesn't have to. In contrast, then let's look at Link. So Link, this had a big 3-month supply, 6-month inside it. So Link's painful actually. So I'll show you what we had a problem. I had a problem with Link, a sort of challenge with Link last year. So you can see here, this had on the January 2025 candle. So when June closed, we closed with a 6-month supply. So when we came back up to test it, what happened? So I had alerts of a possibility of shorting similar high that we've had of this month's candle around the 1420 mark. What eventually happened is it went all the way back up to the top, still held the 6-month supply, but went all the way back up to the top of it, even took out the high of the previous candle, but didn't take out the 6-month entirely before then closing back below. So my concern when we made this new 3-month here is that, so that's the candle with the 3-month where it went all the way up in 6-month supply. Is the 3-month, again, is it going to reject off the bottom, or does it want to go, it could go all the way up to the top here. It's a weak supply. So I was a bit reticent on Link. However, I did alert the level anyway, because also it's already done this. It's already filled that candle, that big drop there. And the wick took out the low. So, and also because I trade purely on supply and demand, or predominantly on supply and demand, so that in this case, this would be, that was a 6-month level. So had some reactions here, then did have some reactions off, I think there was a monthly level inside it. But again, like I say, it just went all the way to the top. So it's possible this goes all the way to the top if it wants to, but it's also possible it rejects immediately off the level. Excuse me. And that's what's happened here. So again, go back to the lower time frame. I had the alert for the start of the 3-month level, but I was telling everybody again, be conscious that it can go higher inside. It's just, I've alerted a lot of the 2 and 3-month supplies just for the case of just being quick, because so many alts now have this 3-month supply structure, slightly different to Link, because Link is obviously one of the stronger coins, but still. And then you're just looking at the reaction when we get there. So then, like most of the alts, this made a new 12-hour supply in here, so I put a re-entry alert on that. Link was the only one, in fact, that just wicked up and took out the high before collapsing off that level. So now again, this is something I haven't alerted 4 or 5-day demand in here because of the fact it's coming off 3-month supply. So my bias is that it should at least take out those lows. And then to the downside, my next alert's down here, or 3-month demand significantly lower. And even in the bigger picture, again, this could still be a large flag like that. So there's still a lot of concerns I have with alts and taking any long entries, but obviously we want to take scalps where we can. So this is a level that's had a few hits previously, so that would be the next level to look at for the possibility of a long. And then shorts, if we do hold this range, then look up at weekly supply up here, or the weekly supply right at the top of the screen up the top. ADA very similar to Link, so in this case made a giant 6-month supply. It's got a monthly inside of this. ADA is actually a bit harder because it's got so many levels. I keep thinking I want to delete some of these, but it's got made a 5-day supply. It's got a 3-month inside there. It's got a 2-month here that hasn't tested any of these levels up here, and weekly all the way at the top. Again, had the trend line stop, so hard to know if it was going to just run through everything. But we're just seeing that weakness on alts that really they haven't got mostly, or at least the majors haven't got very high inside these immediate zones. ADA. So yeah, I had an alert here for 4-day supply inside 2 weekly and then inside the bigger 6 month. This came back for a retest of 12-hour supply that I had alerted here, 8 hour in fact. So yeah, rejected this 8-hour supply for the re-entry, and again has the drop. And again, like Link, haven't alerted 3-4 day demand in here because of the fact we're coming off much higher time frame supply. It's considered it wasn't a good entry, although it did wick off it. So all of these, like I say, so actually I think, yeah, all of them have wicked off the zone and now are all retesting. Link's gone lower, ADA's still above the wick, DOGE's still above the wick. But yeah, I mean, really, I expect them all to either hold or all of them to break. So despite the fact I haven't alerted, I've only alerted the ones that I consider slightly stronger. They're probably all going to do the same thing regardless. Finally, BNB, which again, like TRX, has its own type of structure. So this has a 2-week demand here. So I have alerted more aggressively on that last week on a daily demand, and then more aggressively just for long re-entries on this. Like again, would be really nice if this gets up to here, but has also rejected 5-day supply. It's quite a similar structure to Ether actually. It's still in this last range of this last down move. So can still potentially fall back to the base of this or continue the downtrend if it wants. That's just a correction and it's done. So this is just a hopeful entry based on the 2-week demand in here. And are we going to get another up move to the next zone? Get rid of those. Similar to Ether, you can see here it's come most of the way through a 5-day demand there. It might make a 5-day supply. So I just need to be a little bit careful. You need to be careful if you're trying to trade these. What the reaction, you just need to wait and see if we're going to get a reaction here or is it going to drop deeper. I was toying, I think, with the idea of putting an alert down here, but I just don't like this wickiness through this area. So I think if it does come down deeper inside the 2 weekly, it might just drop lower. Failing that, I've got an alert here on daily demand just at the base of this weekly. And then this was always my preferred zone for long entries in the circle, 6-month demand, and obviously can go deeper inside there, some trend line stops and things, but those are the higher time frame entries that are preferred. And then short entries up there should we get another run. So that's the new majors A, and finally new majors B. And I want to keep this video shorter than an hour so I can get it onto TikTok without having to cut it. So I've got 8 minutes remaining. Do Solana first. So Solana, unfortunately, so I was just a bit too aggressive on these, and I think I commented on that in previous update that is, with hindsight, possibly a little bit stupid, but I think I thought this bounce wouldn't necessarily be that strong. But when I look back at the chop, I just think, why did I alert in here? I think there was some lower time frame, 12-hour supplies and things. This has come up to now hit also 3-month, 2-month supply. I did have a long entry on this actually, but like I said, I've kind of broken my own rule there because I didn't want to have the long entries when they'd come off monthly supplies. This maybe I have to consider that it was a bit different because it's also got 2-week demands coming deeper inside it, but it's also in a 2-week demand. But again, can see if we get a reaction here, but I'm not overly confident given we rejected 2-month supply at the high. My preferred alert was really high, a bit higher though, in that it was a monthly supply and 5-day inside the 2-month. But yeah, just a fair amount of weakness on Solana there. Daily down here if it gets there. So this was a daily demand. I was only looking for a provisional long there. I think that's why it was more aggressive on the shorts because I wasn't overly confident of this zone. Much like I explained on others, like the true demand is this monthly down here. So really you want to see that hold or possibly swing fail, take out the low of there into this weekly below. But again, that's just bigger picture, higher time frame stuff, and there's a monthly all the way down the bottom there. We haven't got the rocks down, which is why it looks so far away. There's a monthly. So the real risk with this, again, is it going to just fall off now? And it's got a big drop if it is going to fall off and come back down here to retest. Very much, again, similar to Ether, it's taken out this high. It's got a kind of nice, what looks like distribution going on here. It could end up as reaccumulation and have some sort of triangle pattern through here for a breakup. It's a possibility, but I need to see more to know or to think that is remotely likely of happening because at the moment it's pointing towards lower high, lower low, lower low maybe. We'll see. So that's Solana. And I hope I can be a little bit quicker on near Atom and Dot. I think And I can't do all this together. Probably not really. I'll be a little bit quicker anyway. So near, I always wanted to be bullish because we were in this 3-month demand, but I've kind of given up on it now because it really just, like, off this first couple of bounces, it didn't get very high again. Like I was hoping, had all these trendline stops up here. If it really wants, it can run. But when it failed to break out even here and failed to take those stops and fell below. So it's difficult. This could still be accumulation, manipulation, and distribution. It's possible, but it needs to, again, give us signs of that. So at the moment, it's just not giving us any signs. It looked like it might do it there, but again, lower high now is broken back below, and also lower high off here. I think I had an alert here for 12-hour supply, and it went a little bit higher. Didn't get a re-entry on that. I think there wasn't a 12-hour to have a re-entry for a lower high, but it went up a little bit higher anyway, hit 3-week level in there. But again, my preference, but this was for it to hit 3-month supply up there, and it just didn't get there. Now has this 3-day demand. So again, just like a choppy, unclear, could hold here, not very likely. Weekly demand below if it chooses to go lower. And really, as we compare this, if you look at this structure, it's just sort of clinging on for dear life. And if you compare to something like DOT, which obviously previously was a similar structure, where DOT has now just fallen off and is at the all-time low. So, near arguably is sort of in a similar area to this now, or it's just sort of clinging on somewhere around those types of levels. Is it just going to follow DOT and just fall off a cliff? So DOT, again, too many levels above. I need to revisit those to see. I had an aggressive, there was a 2-day supply in here, so I had an aggressive short entry on that, which with hindsight was a bit stupid because I'd always wanted for it to take out those highs above that orange level there. In fact, didn't even get there eventually. Again, I put the long entry there. Not ideal. It might make a higher low. It did have a decent move off there, but again, this is an all-time low bar on the wick. This is not a big area that I want to look for longs. The reason I put that one in, you can see this dashed green line that I've got in there very faintly. That was a 61 fib. So again, I just thought, well, okay, it might bounce there as a 61 fib of the entire wick, I think on the linear scale. So yeah, I might have moved a bit. Yeah, I think it's moved a little bit, but yeah, it was a 61 fib on the linear scale. So I thought it was worth looking for possible longs, but this is not a high probability long in there. So again, if it does bounce, you're looking for it to take out the highs there and then possibly into a 3-day, 5-day supply. There's a weekly, there's a monthly. There's just too many levels above that are untested. And then finally, Atom, which gave me the nicest longs. It was still a little bit hard to get into, which I talked about in the last video, but gave some longs off this test of weekly demand here. The wick had taken out the weekly. All-time low is still a lot lower, but again, other than the possibility of taking out trendline stops, there was no real reason why we should expect these to go up here at this stage. This had, like I say, one of the better moves, came off 4-5-day supply, gave a nice re-entry. Actually, I think no, it wasn't ideal on this. I think it didn't quite hit that 3-day level. And I tried to go in a little bit too early, but again, depending on where the stop was, if there were 3 entries there with a higher stop, would have been okay. And still has some space now to get down to even test this demand. So this is the one that possibly looks just slightly different to the others, because if this does come down into here, given that most of these do the same things, then we're probably going to see DOT and near are going to break these 3-day demands of doggy and the ones that are already there. Maybe this is going to bounce higher. Maybe it's going to pick up support like here. But I tend to find if something's behind, then what we're going to find is that the ones that hit early are probably going to run through. So, sorry, not this one. So that it'd be worth, I would consider looking at where the whole market is when Atom hits this level, because generally the one that's lagging can be the one that actually leads the market, and Atom can be quite good for that. So we'll see if Atom gets back down there. Anyway, we're at 59 minutes, so I'm going to say a good night and farewell. I hope that's useful. To keep an eye on Ether for it holding the current level it's at. Bitcoin, if it goes a little bit lower into that 88k level, or I've put my alerts a little bit higher, but the arrow is a bit lower. It could just take out last week's low and swing fail there. It will probably try to swing fail last week's low, so you can keep an eye out for that anyway. And then there's a quick recap of the levels that I've got very tentatively. These are low time frame zones. Watch the start of the video to know what the high time frame zones are. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. Please feel free to join my Telegram channel and have a good evening. Bye.